Hello, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Questions. Who decides when to call you in? And is someone with this training always on call? Let's start with Officer Stevens, if that's okay.
Sure. So, we get called in a variety of ways. Sometimes we will get called to assist the local mental health authority when a call comes in through the mobile crisis line, and they feel like there's an individual in the community that needs an assessment out in the field, and we will accompany one of the clinicians from our crisis center out to the location, let them do the assessment, and then they will staff that case with a doctor at the scene. They'll call the doctor, staff the case with them, and if they feel that they need a higher level of care, we'll do the transport. If not, and they can recommend, some other type of less restrictive treatment. That's always what we try to go for, right? Um, we do have somebody always on call 24/7, especially if it's an escalated mental health call, where there's a possibility of violence that could happen due to maybe a weapon being present. So they will call us in on situations like that as well.
All right, and thank you for that. Now let's go back to Tracy's question here for Chief Gagnon. Maybe he'll have some insight into this. Are we looking to begin this as a pilot program in Auburn Hills?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank Ernie for joining us. It was a powerful film. It really was touching, and I commend you for the work that you're doing. In particular, just your partner Joe opening up about his personal experiences in life, and it was very powerful. So yeah, in Auburn Hills, we subscribe to the One Mind campaign through the International Association of Chiefs of Police. So 100% of our staff are trained in mental health first aid for law enforcement, and as well as 20% of our staff is trained in CIT. Now, we're certainly not like San Antonio. We're a small shop. We have about 50 police officers. But we really have tried to improve our training over the last 5 to 6 years as it relates to responding to people in crisis. Now, one thing we are actively researching and evaluating is partnering with some local police departments around Auburn Hills to actually put mental health professionals within the police department as a co-responder program, essentially. So that's something that we're excited to. We're just like the tip of the iceberg with it, but we hope to get some traction with it, and I think it'd be very beneficial in the future.
Absolutely. Tracy, do you have any follow-up questions?
No, thank you.
All right. Okay, let's move along here. The next question is from Cheryl L. She says, will this training go to staff in the ER units? The majority of them are not equipped to help mental health crisis, not until the psych team shows up. Dan or Chief Gagnon, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I mean, we have, as Deputy Chief Gagnon mentioned, as well as Tricia, we're currently doing the CIT training. We've had 6 of those, and we've had 16 of the mental health first aid trainings. And that type of training, the mental health first aid training, is available to the general community, the general public. There is the one that's specific to public safety that Deputy Chief Gagnon and myself conduct. But here in Oakland County, we have mental health first aid trainers that can open it up to anyone who's interested in it.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. This next one is from Brian N. And we'll send this one to Officer Stevens first. He says, is there a specific training for 911 dispatch to determine what is an appropriate response, i.e. patrol officers versus mental health officers?
Yeah, there is a great question because, if you think about it, our dispatchers, of course, are our first line of first responders for me, right? They're the ones that are going to take the call and make sure that I get home safely. So the more information and the training that they receive, the better, for the officers going to the call. What we do here in Texas is new hires that are dispatchers or call takers are required to take 24 hours in crisis intervention training. 16 hours of that is face-to-face with me and another instructor, and then 8 hours is online through the state commission. And what we did was we had to refigure the way calls were being dispatched because we didn't have a mental health problem code. If it was a mental health issue, it was either coming in as a disturbance, maybe a suicide in progress, a sick, ill person. There was no designated call for mental health. So the first thing we had to do was designate a mental health label that the dispatcher could choose to let the officer know, hey, this is a mental health code. And within that, we created 3 priorities, right? A mental health in progress, a mental health disturbance, and just mental health related. And based on the nature of their call, it would get flagged as one of those mental health calls. And then they have a set of questions that every caller gets asked. And that's, is there a mental health component to this call? Is there somebody that has a mental health issue that's in need of assistance? So that again is going to help the officer's mindset on what they're going to be responding to. Now, the good thing here in San Antonio is every single officer is CIT trained. So regardless, they're going to get a mental health trained officer. They may not get the mental health unit, but they're going to get somebody that's had at least 40 hours of training, because in Texas, in order to earn your next license as a police officer, an intermediate license, you have to take an additional 40 hours of mental health training. So there's a good chance you're going to get an officer with about 80 hours of mental health training being dispatched by a dispatcher who's received over 24 hours in mental health training. So I think we're doing a fantastic job here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's see here. Looks like questions are rolling in, so I'm going to keep going. From Christine B. As law enforcement, how do you engage your peers and fellow officers in this important conversation about connecting people to mental health supports? Let's send that one to Chief Gagnon first.
Well, I think Dan and I make a point to discuss this important topic in our training. We need to kill the stigma associated with mental health issues, and particularly, like you saw in the film, the statistics related to officers taking their own lives is way higher than those killed in the line of duty in the United States every year. So when people hear that, we need to make it okay for people to open up, reach out, and gain or seek out professional help if they need it, and establish some peer support within our departments that people can openly talk and feel comfortable about it. We cannot continue to have a stigma that this person's a bad egg or this officer's not going to cut it because of things that they're dealing with in their personal lives. So that certainly has helped just having a conversation in general and sharing statistics for sure.
Absolutely. All right, now I'm going to send that one over to Officer Stevens too.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, Chief, you got to normalize the conversation. You have to have a community where you have a culture of wellness, right? You have to promote like your National Alliance on Mental Illness within your community. You've got to support the organizations that are advocating and helping those with mental health issues. So, when they see the police department partner with NAMI, maybe at one of their walks or at an event, and saying, hey, we're here as a partner with the community, let's normalize the conversation. And community, you can help us be better at responding to these type of needs, because we don't know everything. We're the police department, but I promise you, we don't have all the answers. And we're here to learn from you and to partner with you and to bridge that gap that so many cities disconnect with because they're not partnering with their local mental health authority or their stakeholders within the community. You've got to normalize it. You got to talk about it. And then you've got to show action, right? You've got to partner and get out in the community where mental health is, and show that, hey, we're here with you. We're here to help you, and we're not just gonna leave you and try to arrest away the problem, because that's not the problem. The problem is the inability to receive the proper training to recognize what a mental health crisis looks like, de-escalate it, and then give proper treatment, possibilities for them.
For sure. All right, let's see. We have a couple of people raising their hands. So looks like John Paul Torres, if you want to unmute and ask your question, feel free.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, officers, for what you're doing. I was a probation officer in Detroit for several years, and I used to work with the Detroit Wayne County Mental Health Court. Now I'm a court administrator, and I'm also on the OCHN board of directors. But my question was, do you guys collaborate or partner at all with any specialty court programs like mental health court programs, drug court programs? Because in Michigan, those have emerged, huge growth of them over the past 10 years. So I was wondering if you guys work with them at all.
Who wants to take? You want me to take it? You want me to toss it to the chief? Okay,
You go
so
for
here.
it.
Okay, first of all, thank you for asking that. I love the question, and yes, we partner with our mental health court here. In
Cool.
fact, so if an individual ends up in the mental health court, they are assigned a public defender, right? What I do is I'll come in with that public defender, and because the public defender has to stay in the court and advocate for their clients. Where I come in, I say, look, they're on the mental health docket. If they're willing and will voluntarily sign into treatment with the program that I'm involved in, I will guarantee all their pretrial requirements. If they need to come in and give a UA, I'll bring them. If they need to go get community service, I'll find it and transport them. You tell me what you need done for pretrial services, but by the time that court date rolls around, if they've done everything they've needed to do to complete that pretrial, if it's a misdemeanor mostly, and they've not been rehospitalized, they've not been rearrested, will you dismiss this case? And 100% of the times, I've had every single case dismissed for an individual that was incarcerated for a misdemeanor offense, even though there's a mental health component tied to it. But it's because of the collaboration between the police department and the mental health courts. And we have other specialty courts, right? We have a civil court for assisted outpatient treatment on the civil side. But on the criminal side, I love it because you ought to see their faces when the judge says, okay, case dismissed, you did what you needed to do. And we look at and we measure a 6% recidivism rate in that court, which is unheard of. You can't find me a DWI court that's got something. It's not going to happen. So thank you for asking that, John Paul. We do that here, and it's one of my favorite parts of my job.
Excellent. Cool.
Yeah.
Chief Gagnon, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, just to piggyback, I sit on our local at 52-3 District Court, our sobriety treatment court. I represent law enforcement for 2 judges' dockets, and it's rewarding. I'm sure watching the film, Ernie doing the follow-up and seeing the positive impacts he has in people's lives, it's very fulfilling to sit on that sobriety treatment court and see some of those positive impacts it has on people. I know we rely heavily on Dan Holloway and the jail diversion program in the county. So much so that if we have a nonviolent misdemeanor and somebody suffering from mental illness at the time, we feel very comfortable in diverting that person to common ground, letting Dan do follow up with that individual or the professionals at OCHN. But as far as a mental health court, we don't necessarily have that at our district court level. There may be at the circuit court level. I'm not that familiar with it myself, but we really rely heavily on the jail diversion program here.
John Paul, do you have any follow-up?
No follow-up,
Okay.
but just it was a great film. Just the follow through that you do, as was mentioned, and I think the way that you talk to the individuals that you're interacting with, and a lot of that, when I was a probation officer, same thing. It's just the way you interact with people and that you treat them like a fellow human being, and don't judge them. I think makes a whole lot of difference in the outcomes. And that's how you approach it. So thank you for what you both do, both of you, all 3 of you. Thank you.
John Paul.
All right, let's see. Cheryl, your hand is up. Would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, and I'm not sure why my last name is not showing up. It's Cheryl LaFleur from the Anti-Stigma team. Would love to come out and do a presentation for Officer Gagnon, or however you say your name. We don't charge anything, and we do it virtually. So we would
Well, that'd be great. I'd love to get your contact information for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get your information from Emily or Christine, and then yeah, I have to talk to Malkaya too.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Perfect. We're making connections here, folks. All right. Let's see here. Joanna from the Autism Alliance asks, what would you suggest a parent or family say when calling in when an individual is having a crisis? Let's start with, Chief Gagnon, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. One program I didn't mention that we've started through our website, through the police department, is that people can voluntarily notify us if an individual lives at their home, a family member, for example, that maybe has autism or special needs or is living with a mental illness. If they feel comfortable, it's obviously strictly voluntary, but you could complete a form describing some of the key things that maybe would calm a person down, or in the event this person runs from the home, where they may go, that sort of information. And it's submitted to us, and we put it in our CAD, our computer aided dispatching, for the premise information for the location to give to officers. But to answer your question, I think the most important thing to do is, if you can tell us some things that would help us do our job to get this person help and to calm and de-escalate the situation. For example, I have a buddy that their niece, or I'm sorry, their nephew has autism in a grown man, but it can become at times very agitated. But if you mention anything related to Disney World, for example, he calms right down. So that stuff we would like to know ahead of time. So when you call, that would be very helpful. Things like that, small things that can de-escalate and help the situation.
Absolutely. And Officer Stevens, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, you talk Disneyland to me, I'm gonna calm down too. I love that place. But yeah, you're right on to it. Just let the dispatcher know as much information you can. If your community has crisis intervention team officers and you want a CIT officer, make sure you request that when you call, because not all departments are 100% trained, but a lot of them, if they follow the Memphis model, they recommend like 20% of your department be trained. So you can always ask, do you have a mental health officer available, that can respond out here, because they'll have a little bit more knowledge. Just like if you were a DWI officer, you have more knowledge in field sobriety. So it's not a knock on officers that haven't had the training. It's just the ones that have, are a little bit more educated as to, de-escalation skills, things like that.
Perfect. All right. We still have questions rolling in. I'm going to keep on going. All right. Kara says the Autism Alliance of Michigan offers Michigan autism safety trainings across the state. This would be a great program to consider for PDs. Feel free to contact me. Okay, Kara, thank you. That's great information to know. This is why we're here, making connections, helping people out. So thank you for that. Trisha, she is our director of training at OCHN, and she co-hosted the CIT training that we had a few weeks ago. She says, with your agency prioritizing mental health, what is being done for officer wellness? We'll start with you, Officer Stevens. You're already smiling.
I tell you what, I'm going to be honest. This is the best panel I've ever been on, because y'all are hitting on some so important points, right? So officer wellness, that is such an underlooked at phenomenon, right, within law enforcement. It's just, that's really where the stigma is. If you look at stigma to find out why officers aren't asking for help, the Fraternal Order of Police said 87% said it's stigma. 79% said they're scared to get an unfit for duty, and 59% said they don't believe their EAP program will help them. So I just got back, and I'm going to give credit to the Pinole Police Department in California. I was out there training, and their chief Neil Gang, came up with what's called the Asher model. And you can Google it, it's on Google. But I adopted that model here for San Antonio. And what it is it creates a culture of wellness for your police department. And there's 7 pillars to it. But number one, you have to build awareness within your department to say it's okay not to be okay, right? It's just not okay to stay that way, right? And then you got to have a resource available for the officers. For them, it's the Cortico app. They've got, apps on their phones that they purchase that has information for a therapist, maybe information on anxiety, depression, whatever it may be, right? So there's resources. They talk about a healthy environment. They have quiet rooms. They have a gym that officers can work out on duty. So there's so much you can do for an officer's wellness. And it shows so much um, forward thinking on a chief's part, on leadership's part, if they buy into that human capital, saying, hey, our officers, we're invested in them because they're more than their badge. They are people behind that badge that deal with, on average, a 20-year officer will have to deal with 188 severe traumatic events in their lifetime, see or be involved in them. Whereas a civilian, one or two, right? And I'm talking about severe traumatic issues. So you have to invest in your officers from rookie to retirement. And it cannot, you can't have just a check the box, hey, we got a peer support, we're doing something. No, you really need to get invested from the top down. Let it be an environment where officers, are willing to talk about it. Like if I asked Chief Gagnon, hey, Chief, you want to go bowling on Thursday? And he tells me, man, Ernie, I wish I could, but I got to go to my therapist. That should not shock my conscience at all. I should say, okay, no problem. Maybe next week, right? That's how you have to normalize it and break down that stigma.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask Chief Gagnon if he has any follow-up to that.
Yeah, that's great. I'm certainly going to look up that Asher model that you said. As Ernie's talking more and more, like the wheels are spinning in my head. But we certainly have tried to. We've lowered the bar of severity, in our opinion, to tell people and provide for our officers a professional to talk to. There's times in our careers where it's like, okay, you went to a traumatic event, and it's pretty easy to identify that we need to debrief this incident or we need to get a group together here. But we've made a concerted effort to lower that bar and offer support for officers. I saw Dr. Gardner on here earlier. I'm sure he's still on, but he's one individual that we send police officers to debrief critical incidents, for example, or other local counselors that have been in the profession of law enforcement. And like Ernie said, we need to talk about how we eat, how we sleep, and proper exercise. I mean, we a couple years ago, we allow officers now to exercise on duty. They come in, they can exercise. But we need to talk about that they're getting enough sleep and that they're eating right. And Ernie, I seen in the movie there, him and Joe are talking about what he's bringing for lunch. Ernie seemed a little healthier than Joe at the time, but it's important stuff. I mean, it's important for our wellness and doing the job that we do. So, good stuff.
Absolutely. I agree. And Dan, I don't want you to feel left out here. I know that you work with police departments across the county. So anything that you see about officer wellness that you would like to share?
Pretty much just that's been one of the biggest things I've learned as being a mental health professional and working with and training law enforcement. It's amazing to hear the testimonials and to see sort of with Chief Gagnon there's like this kind of credibility that I think that allows me to open up these discussions about what officers can do and what what resources are available to them. And it's amazing every time we do a class, do a training, I learn more and more about the field of law enforcement and the challenges and the incredible skill set that goes into law enforcement. You think of all the different hats they wear, from the community caretaker function that they have, obviously law enforcement. And it's just really amazing and impressive to see that dynamic that takes place when there's officers. It's an 8-hour training that we do, and the first 2 hours are sort of, no one really wants to talk. And then, Chief Gagnon will open up and talk about some difficult calls he's been on. And by the last 2 hours, there's this whole different sort of open dialogue that's happening where officers are really sharing stories with each other. And that's an exciting part. Ryan mentioned Dr. Gardner, who's a great resource, and I put his contact information out when we do those trainings. So it's really cool to see that dynamic just changed in 8 hours. And it makes me realize that we have a long ways to go, but given the right forum, given that reduced stigma, officers really do want to help each other and help themselves.
Thanks, Dan. It's a sense of camaraderie of sorts.
Yeah.
All right. Next, we have Trisha again, who says, what do you recommend for police agencies who have sent officers to CIT training but may not have a CIT program? Can we go to Officer Stevens for that one?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Because what we can do and what we've done here before is so to give you an idea, in San Antonio, we have 27 other municipalities within the city, right? Some smaller agencies. They will send some of their officers to our training, and I give them all the material, and basically they can go back now and be a role model, a liaison for their department, and say, you know what, let me be the law enforcement, let me be the mental health liaison, right? Let me do some follow-up on these. Let me go to the monthly meetings, with these medical directors at these roundtables and find out what resources our city is entitled to. What about mobile crisis? What does the sheriff department come into our city to serve mental health warrants? Whatever the issue is, I think it's great that they come in because, if they get good training, it's just like anybody else. You go to good training, you come back and you start telling other people about it. And before you know it, now that person signed up and they're coming to the training. And that's what we've seen is, we'll get an officer maybe from a department with 30, 40 officers, but every time we hold a class, we're getting requests from that department for more officers to be able to attend. So I highly recommend it. Anybody, think about it. The training is de-escalation, right? Just a majority of it is de-escalation. What officer would not benefit from taking that kind of training, right? And if you do it properly and you do a good job, you can introduce other topics, within CIT, such as the importance of body language, vocalics, social and emotional intelligence, procedural justice. There's so much more that you can add into this training to really make it a bona fide gold standard. And you can do it in any community or any department. It just takes, somebody saying, hey, this is a priority for our community. So I'm going to give the officers the best training that's out there possible. We're going to go after it and we're going to provide that for the community. And you watch, that legitimate authority that you see take place between community and police department is remarkable.
Agreed. Okay. Jody, she says, I worked as a probation officer for years and witnessed firsthand the way POs and police officers talk to and treat individuals a lot of times. It is so inspiring and makes me so hopeful that there are officers of the law that have these kinds of values and beliefs. It's exciting to be in this space with you. Thanks, Jody. All right, I believe this is the famous Dr. Gardner. He says, given the national push to employ clinicians in law enforcement, is anyone aware of any policy and procedure departments may use for embedding clinicians with CIT trained officers on patrol?
So we do that here in San Antonio. I'm in a program called the Program for Intensive Care Coordination. And very quickly, what we did was we identified the top 100 most involuntarily committed individuals in San Antonio, those that repeat over and over again for mental health that have to be taken to the hospital. So what the hospitals did was they said, hey, we're losing a lot of money. Every time these individuals walk through the door, a lot of them are unfunded and we're going in the hole. So they decided to put together a pool of money. And that pool of money, since it's not a grant funded source of money, it's not earmarked for anything in particular. So they paid for a police officer to ride with a clinician and a paramedic. And they paid for a doctor. We have money for medications, transportation, clothing, ID recovery, whatever there's a barrier that we can identify for treatment, that's what we go after. Whether it's Social Security benefits, housing, food stamps, cell phone, whatever you need, we're going to get that for you. So we work with the top 100. And what we did was we signed a hospital agreement, right, an OCA, with a memorandum of understanding with each entity, and everybody that we go out and touch get a HIPAA waiver signed so we can continue continuity of care and deal with the privacy issues on the HIPAA part. And it's amazing. What we've seen is on average, these individuals were getting emergency detained or involuntarily committed about 3.2 times per month. And now, 1 year later, we've looked at the data and it's 0.96. So we've shown a decrease in the involuntary commitments because we identified the gaps of treatment and treated the issue pre-crisis before police actually had to respond. So that's kind of a program we're doing here.
All right. I believe Dr. Gardner has his hand up, so if you'd like to unmute, feel free.
Can you hear me? 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 Just the first time.
We're getting an echo, though.
Great video, great presentation. I'm a clinical and police psychologist, work with the York County Sheriff's Office and about a dozen local departments. I'm trying to develop a new program with the Sheriff Department. I have 5 doctoral level psychologists, 1 doctoral level social worker, and 2 master's level clinicians that I'm trying to get embedded with, along with Lieutenant Todd Hill, who should be on here. We're working to develop a mental health response team, dedicated card just like you have. But these are all clinicians who have been or are going to be trained as reserve officers. I've been 26 years, I'm a reserve lieutenant with the Sheriff Department and a hostage crisis negotiator. So what I'm running into is just trying to put together a policy and procedure to develop this protocol, and also some funding, maybe a federal grant.
Yeah, I would first of all pursue that, number one. Number two, the policy that you can put in place is very simple. A lot of that's going to be safety and tactics, right, for the clinician. Clearing the scene, making sure that the officer is the first one to go up to the door, clear the scene, make sure the scene is safe. But again, if you follow those grants, they're going to be earmarked for certain things. So I would actually reach out to your community, to the hospitals, to the treatment facilities, to find out, hey, would you like to partner with us? This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to reduce the cost that the patients are costing you, the frequent utilizers that come in over and over again, by pre-engaging the crisis, by taking a clinician to them, to finding out why are they not involved in the services that are available for them. Is it because they don't have transportation? Is it because they don't even have an ID? If you don't have an ID here in San Antonio, you can't even stay the night at the Salvation Army. So I've got to do ID recovery for them. You just got to find out food stamps. Easy to get somebody, food stamps. It just takes me probably 30 days. I can get them food stamps. Social Security, a little bit difficult, but if you get started on it for an individual, within 6 months to a year, more like a year, and they can qualify for their benefits, now you got housing. I mean, you just got to start. You just got to, but they need your expertise. They need your clinicians' expertise to help the officer, guide them down the right path for recovery. Because you're going to run into a lot of this is going to be substance use, a lot of it. And your clinicians are going to know what resources are available, right, to help somebody with that. So, I love the idea. I love your passion, what you're going to do. You're going to be successful. I know you are.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right. Alex Pickens says, Lansing, Michigan's PD embeds a social worker with road patrol. Social work program started in 2017-ish and has grown to include an internship program for clinical hours for MSW students. Lansing PD has also trained members of the Chaplain Corps in CIT and embeds chaplains with officers on ride-alongs. All right. Thank you for that. Okay. Sherry Gerby, this one is for Officer Stevens. She asks, can you expand on ID recovery?
Sure. So for ID recovery, there's 3 things that we need to do for an individual, because part of we serve is homeless or unhoused, right? They live on the streets. They've got nothing. Usually the things they have get stolen all the time, which includes their ID. So in order for me to qualify somebody for food stamps, I need them to have an ID. I need them to have a social security card, and I need them to have a birth certificate in order for doors to open for this individual, right? You've got to have those 3 documents in place. So the way I start this is, if they've been hospitalized anytime recently, all I have to do is go to that hospital and get a face sheet showing the last four, if they show it, of their social security number, if not just their name on it. That's enough for Social Security for me to take them to the Social Security office and get them a Social Security card. I'll use the mailing address at our clinic, and when it arrives, I'll contact them and give them their Social Security card. Once I have that, then I can go and start the birth certificate process. Along with that, and it's kind of tricky. If they haven't had an ID within 2 years, I've got to find out if they've ever been booked, or they have a booking photo. If they do, I can use that. Go to our Department of Public Safety and order their driver's license. Then I can go to the birth certificate, vital records, and get a birth certificate. Once you have those three items in place, that's what you're going to need to start getting your benefits from Social Security. So, it's so simple. You think it's so simple just to, oh, okay, well, you've got a mental health diagnosis, you probably qualify for Social Security, but if you don't have any of your documents, you can't even fill out the paperwork. So we have to start at zero, with somebody that has no documentation, get them that documentation, get them into services, and start documenting everything for them. So when I apply for benefits for them, we now have a paper trail, if that helps.
Absolutely. And it looks like Trisha followed up in the chat and said Oakland County has an ID task force to assist with individuals who are homeless in obtaining their IDs.
Perfect.
Thank you, Trisha. All right, Kathy Yunker, she is the manager of our Justice League, as we call them, and works with Dan closely. She asks, does San Antonio have research and statistics we can share with local hospitals that demonstrate the outcomes you are seeing?
Yeah, so those are the things that I just quoted earlier about the decline in emergency detentions. We have all that data. And what we also have in the last 5 years on our website, and I don't know if it's correlation or causation, but as you train your officers, and Chief Gagnon he'll be able to attest to this, as you train your officers in de-escalation and crisis intervention, what we've noticed was a 5-year decline in use of force. Now, can you say that's because of CIT training? I would like to think so, because I'm the trainer, right? But they also change the definition of use of force sometimes, right? So that can play into it a little as well. But we have all that's on our website. We have the documentation showing the decline in emergency detentions. But what you also might see is, as the training progresses, you might see a spike in involuntary commitments, because now your officers are aware and have the training of what a mental health crisis looks like, and knows, hey, this individual needs to go get some treatment. And now you've got your involuntary commitment versus either just leaving them alone or trying to arrest them, right? So as the training goes up, you might see a spike in your admissions, but overall you're going to see a reduction in your jail population and reduction in your use of force.
Chief Gagnon, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think just like Ernie said, I think you're also going to see, we noticed there was you have to be patient with these calls, obviously, and there's more time spent on mental health calls, which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing, but officers are spending more time, and like watching Ernie and Joe and just getting down to people's level, treating them with dignity, respect, having some empathy. It takes some time to build some trust and communication. So I've actually been doing some studying in regards to some co-responder programs as well. And I think, like Ernie said, long-term effects are there is a reduction in hospitalizations compared to normal patrol. Normal patrol is quick to make a quick decision. This person's got to go. It's involuntarily being committed to the hospital. However, CIT trained co-response programs, they have other resources to give people, and maybe they don't need to go to the hospital, or maybe they don't need to go to the crisis center. So there is a reduction in hospitalizations.
All right, thank you. We're going to wrap up here in a few minutes. Does anybody have any final questions for any of our three panelists? Alex says, how do you know when you want to change? Oh, How do you know when you want a change for an unhoused person? More than an unhoused person. Alex, would you mind turning your mic on and asking the question? Maybe he's retyping it here. Mic's not working. How do you know when you want a change for an unhoused person more than the unhoused person?
How do you know when you want to change? For me, it's engagement, right? There's a lot of people that live on the streets and want to live that way, and that's their right, and you have to respect that. As much as your heart says, "Hey, there's something better for you," right? Is there, or is it better because you think it is, right? So you've got to get outside of yourself, and actually, to get empathy, what Chief was talking about, to get empathy, you have to really understand what that person wants in their life, and not everybody wants to change their lifestyle, but there are some that are down on their luck, that are struggling, and just don't know what resources to make that next step, right? So there's people that I engage all the time on the street. They're like, "Hey, leave me alone, man. Like, you always coming around trying to help me," and it's okay, because I always leave them with something, whether it's something to eat, something to drink. If it's getting cold, maybe a beanie or something. But I'm always going to let them know it's okay if you keep telling me no. But I'm going to keep checking on you, because you never know. You never know. You might think that, hey, transitional housing might be something for me to consider. ID recovery and getting a food card stamp and things like that might make life a little bit easier. So, I'm never going to stop trying. But at some point, also you have to respect that person's decision to live the way that they want to live.
He did follow up and say, when the doctor wants a cure more than the patient, the doctor can burn out. Ernie is the doctor. You gained another title here tonight.
Oh no.
He says, thank you, great answer. All right. We'll take one final question if somebody can get it in really quick. Kathy, her hand is up. Go ahead and unmute, Kathy.
Okay, awesome. I'm actually walking in the park, but I work on the film team, and I just wanted to tell everybody how they could get information about the movie if you want to bring it to your community. And you could bring Ernie and or Joe with it, virtually, of course, in their cop cars. So the website for the film is www.ernieandjoethefilm.com. And maybe, Emily, you can send out that information or put it in the chat. I can't seem to access the chat through my phone, but I just wanted everyone to know it's ernieandjoethefilm.com. And you can sign up there to request a screening like this.
Perfect.
Thank you. And thank you, Ernie,
Kathy,
for being here, and Chief Gagnon and Mr. Holloway. It's just been an amazing conversation, and I'm echoing that from the filmmaker who's listening to the call. So she's really moved as well.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. As she mentioned, I will put the film's website into the chat, and I'm also putting in the chat right now a survey that the film's crew would like us to fill out. So if you would please fill that out, they would really appreciate it. So that's the first link you're getting. The second link you're getting is directly to the Ernie and Joe, the film's website. So that is the second link. And before we go, I'd like to take a moment to, of course, thank Officer Stevens, Chief Gagnon, and Dan Holloway for being here tonight. If you're able to, please turn on your cameras and we can all give them a round of applause. This was absolutely amazing. So thank you. All right. I see you, Kathy, walking in the park. All right. I would also like to thank everybody who participated tonight: law enforcement, community members, stakeholders, service providers, board members, and everybody else who is here. And I have to give one more shout out to Kathy, who's walking in the park, because without her guidance, this wouldn't be possible. So I really appreciate it. We will
Thank
be.
you, Emily.
Yeah, of course. Stay warm out there.
Hey, hey, Ernie, real quick, I appreciate all the work you're doing down there, you and your partner Joe and your team, and you keep it up. God bless you and stay safe down there.
Hey, thank you, Chief. I just connected with you on Twitter and left you a message, so I put my phone number in there in case you need anything. I'm at your beck and call, sir. Thank you.
All right, this was great. Thank you all again. As Kathy mentioned, the password for the film that we shared earlier will be available until tomorrow at midnight. So if you want to rewatch it, for me, maybe the fifth time, feel free. You will have access. And with that, have a great rest of your night and stay safe. Thank you all again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.